state of the motion picture industry.
"50-50 by 2020 to get women to get the bigger budgets as well.
It's very important that we put the stories in the hands of the people who own those stories.
Welcome to the Industry Conference. My name is Jeff McNunn, and I'm the new Director of Industry here at the Toronto International Film Festival. To begin, we would like to acknowledge that this event is taking place on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the territorial of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community. Please note that there is absolutely no professional photography or video allowed in the studio. No need to worry though. All of our sessions are live streamed on our website and our YouTube channel. Please do tweet about all our sessions and keep the conversations #TIFF19. Our next panel is a dialogue session. These sessions bring multiple perspectives to light and tackle changes in the industry that impact or are impacted by business, creativity, and new technologies. A big thank you to Ontario Creates for supporting this program. Our first dialogue, titled Film Festivals, New Leadership, New Horizons, was sparked by the recent shift at the top of many of the world's most influential film festivals. Joining us on stage for the first time together in their new roles are Kim Yutani, Director of Programming at the Sundance Film Festival, Paolo Moretti, Artistic Director of the Directors Fortnight at the Cannes Film Festival, Mariette Rissenbeek, our Executive Director of the Berlin International Film Festival, and Cameron Bailey, Artistic Director and co-head of the Toronto International Film Festival. Guiding us through this conversation is IndieWire Editor-at-Large Anne Thompson. So, without further ado, please welcome Anne and our speakers to the stage.
Okay, I get the last seat. Okay.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you. Welcome. Thank you, Cameron.
Happy to
Cameron
be here. Thank you.
For being our gracious host. I've been coming to this festival since 1987, and it's my favorite. I look forward to it every year. And I know Kim Yutani from Los Angeles, where she used to run Outfest, and I was incredibly impressed by the program you put together at Sundance last year. And of course, I go to Cannes every year, and Paolo Moretti is running the very important Directors Fortnight. And this year, I'm going to Berlin for the first time to check out this extraordinary festival that Mariette is running. So I would love, starting with you, Mariette, if you would, tell us what distinguishes your festival from all the others. If you can figure out a good way to distill that.
How to describe that? Well, the Berlinale is taking place in a very big city, and it's a very lively, also politically very interested audience in the city. So I think that is a very important characteristic for the Berlinale.
It's also very, very big.
It's also very, very big, but Toronto is also very, very big. Yes. So that's maybe, I'd say that both of them, the big cities, a big audience, a very enthusiastic audience. I think in both festivals that's the case.
And both of you serve industry, as you can see here, as well as audiences.
Exactly.
What do you do for the industry in terms of supporting them?
Well, in Berlin there's a market, like with stands, and there's a lot of conferences, debates, educational programs to sort of support the industry. I think
Cameron, what would you say?
Yeah, we don't have a formal market like Berlin and Cannes do, but we have a lot of market activity that happens here, a lot of buying and selling of films.
Definitely.
One of the main differences, I guess, is that as opposed to Berlin and Cannes, where there are stands and people are having meetings and selling films that way, the screenings really matter here. So the press and industry screenings, where people are going to see films, a lot of buyers tend to prioritize screenings over meetings because they want to catch up with films they might have seen at other festivals, or they want to see the new films, and they will buy from the screenings.
So you guys are all what I would call thought leaders, and we're all managing a lot of big shifts in the industry at large and in the way people see film festivals, and a lot of change. And I'd like to ask each of you we're just going to jump to one of the issues at hand. How are you dealing with the rising importance of representation and diversity? And I'll start with you, Cameron.
We're in it. I think that's the main thing. You know, film festivals are almost 80 years old, and we shouldn't act like it's 80 years ago. It's right now. It's 2019. So we want to show the films that represent what's going on right now, what the audiences are looking for, I think, very natural desire that everybody has to see something of their own life up on the big screen. And for a long time, that was not the case. And I think most of us grew up with movies that had a very limited slice of representation in terms of who were the heroes, who were the protagonists, what kinds of stories, what was seen as important in terms of storytelling in movies. That's changed a lot. And the audience is driving this, and we want to be a part of that.
Kim, you put together one of the most diverse slates I've ever seen at Sundance, which is always known for that anyway. What are some of the best practices for achieving that goal?
Well, for me, when I got this position, I was able to bring on new programmers, and I think that for me that's the key to ensuring that your program is diverse and that you're having the right conversations. We have a great team, and I'm not just talking about race or gender, I'm also talking about backgrounds and sort of our experiences, our life experiences, really inform the conversations that we have as a team. So I think that very organically creates a diverse program.
Paolo?
Well, the Fortnight has been the first of the Cannes section selection to have a gender equal selection committee, and I think that with the committee, the work that we did is not to kind of have this idea of quotas, but to develop a sensitivity about whatever is going on. So it's difficult to express kind of scientifically in a way, but I think there is something that is going on, like Cameron was saying, that we are really feeling and willing to encourage and to develop. It's something progressive, actually. It's not something that it changes from the day to the other. And so this is the way we are kind of treating or being sensitive to what is happening. And the first step, of course, was kind of to work with the selection committee on this direction and to develop this sensitivity.
And Fortnight, of all the programs at Cannes, is the most forward-looking. I mean, you tend to go with more new filmmakers.
What do you mean, sorry?
You're looking for new filmmakers. You're looking for...
Yes, it's our main focus. So it's called the Directors Fortnight, and it's always been like that. And it has a tradition, of course, of championing kind of voices that are not, let's say, immediately welcome by the industry. This is where the Fortnight comes from. There were films that were presented at the Fortnight in the early 70s that without the Fortnight would have never been in Cannes, and the Fortnight launched kind of historic careers and changed it, I'm measuring words, but really kind of developed and made the film language evolve, I think, with a lot of filmmakers that the Fortnight supported throughout the years. So this is what we are all about.
Exactly.
And it's a very natural kind of approach we are having, and we are just trying to keep the tradition going.
So I'm most
Go ahead.
most envious of with the Fortnight, Paolo, is the trailer that you have that represents, if anybody's been to Cannes,
It's wonderful.
and you go to a screening of the Directors Fortnight, you begin by watching a trailer which shows the history of your section and all of the filmmakers who were launched at the Fortnight, and it feels like it's a history of contemporary cinema. Everybody's there, and they often got their launch there before going on to greater fame, and I wish we had something like that.
Thanks.
It's fantastic.
But the other aspect of it is that the Fortnight is able to be a little more progressive than some of the other sections of Cannes, which have come under a lot of criticism, especially for defining auteurs so narrowly.
That's thanks for saying that as well. And getting a lot of compliments. Thank you. I'm flattered.
And you look good too.
You too. Yes, it's about that. It's about basically trusting people that kind of maybe nobody is trusting yet or not at that level, and providing also a connotation because well, the Fortnight it's you know, there is no competition. Is a selection that really kind of tried to champion kind of voices that were doing something extremely original in the 70s especially. I think this is one of the turning points of the Fortnight that I'm really interested in carrying on. In the 70s, they were programming films that they were not supposed to have a commercial potential. They were just programming kind of authorial voices, kind of Werner Herzog, you know, the Dwarfs, Aguirre, these kind of films that at the time, I mean, they were not kind of suspected to be kind of an instant hit at the festival. But they revealed their commercial potential because of the fact that they were being screened at Cannes, where all the kind of major players of the industry were. So these kind of very radical voices were starting to sell and to reveal the commercial potential. And I think that this, of course, it's completely different world, but I think that there is something about that it's still actual and contemporary, and that we are still there for that, kind of to maybe kind of reveal a commercial potential of very radical kind of voices. So this is, I really think we are, I mean, I'm trying to reflect about how the Fortnight can make sense or still make sense without being overlapping, you know, with other festival or events. And I really try to keep that idea and to find a contemporary declination to that dynamic.
This is an opportunity for me to find things out that I might not otherwise find out. Do you fight with the other sections for filmmakers?
No, we are all...
Never. Oh, please, please.
Yeah. No, let's say that I wouldn't call it fight. It's a healthy competition, let's say. No, it's really kind of about seeing a film. We all see more or less the same films. I mean, I don't get to see the Ken Loach or Almodovar. You know, these are natural
the ordained auteurs, yes,
natural competition material. But we got to see a lot of films that also the other section are seeing, and other festivals are seeing as well. So it's really about making kind of the most interesting proposal to the film and try to kind of explain as much as possible why we think the film would make sense there, and what we think the film and the outcome can be for the film. So this is what we are trying to do, and there is no kind of harsh feeling. And actually, you know, I think that the kind of expressing an interest or a desire from the Fortnight can also impulse some movement to the film that can kind of bring them to other positions, which are actually very interesting. And it happened quite a few times this year, and I was really kind of sincerely the happiest person that was happening, kind of seeing a film that we really liked ending up in the competition. It's a wonderful opportunity and spot for the film. So I'm not jealous at all.
Are you able to say an example?
No, I won't. No,
Okay.
I won't. But it happened.
So Berlin, back to Mariette, the question of diversity and in programming and in the staff. Are you addressing that too?
Well, as said before, the festival reflects very much the city of Berlin, and since the late 90s, Berlin has developed very strongly, being a very diverse city, a very culturally developed city. A lot of people from abroad come there and start to work there. So I think the festival and its developments in the past 20 years reflect this development in the city. And of course, Berlin has many sections, let's say it that way, but these sections are very independently curated, so that also contributed to a very diverse program. Then we have the section for generation, for a young audience, which where sometimes a focus on native cinema. I think there are very many different aspects, and the gender issue is very well taken care of in Berlin. I think like 65% women usually within the festival.
The panorama section in Berlin has always also been a real groundbreaker in terms of showing LGBTQ cinema, going back to when I first started attending in the 90s and probably before that. And I think a lot of festivals that were not specifically queer festivals actually took a lead from Berlin and the panorama as well.
Their 30th edition next year.
Wow,
The LGBT, there's this queer award which is extended in Berlin within the section. So, yeah. So I think this is a lot of elements which make it a very diverse festival.
And Cameron, you've been championing films from Africa for a really long time. What are some of the things that people should be checking out at this festival?
There's a film called The Lost Okoroshi from Nigeria. A few years back, we did a spotlight on Lagos, and I got to travel there. Actually, I was with Funa Maduka, formerly of Netflix, and we met a lot of filmmakers, and Abba Makama was one of the ones that we met. He's got his new film here. That's one I would definitely check out. There are several. We've got films from South Africa, a film from Sudan, and one of the things about any film festival is that you get to see films like these that you will never have another chance to see. We talk a lot about, streamers versus conventional distribution and that kind of thing, but the fact is a lot of films have access to none of that, right? They come to film festivals and they just don't get seen, and films from Africa are a part of that, and there are many other parts of the world where they just don't have any access to North American audiences beyond film festivals. So.
Well, let's talk about that. What do you see the role of film festivals playing in a time where people have, in some ways, more access to a place like Netflix, but less access to 2-hour movies in theaters?
Well, I will say that both Netflix and Amazon have been really influential, I think, in getting films to wide audiences. And you think of films coming from India, from a filmmaker like Anurag Kashyap, which is suddenly being seen in 190 countries around the world, or Devine, that French film, which was such a big hit at Cannes, actually, and then went on to Netflix, and suddenly a film about Black and Arab young women in Paris was being seen in the same 190 countries. A service like that is largely global, maybe China notwithstanding, can offer opportunities to filmmakers that nothing else can. And suddenly everyone in all kinds of corners of the world are able to talk about these new filmmakers. We still like movie theaters, though. So we like to be able to offer that experience to the audience, to be able to see them together. On a big screen is one thing, and sometimes technically that makes a big difference. A film like Roma is a different experience on a big screen than it is on a small screen. But the most important part of it for me is actually the collective experience of watching it, which you don't get in your living room or on your phone.
So Netflix is basically pioneering this new model, which is to show movies for 3 weeks and then put them up online. What do you think about that? Anybody? Kim?
Well, I think Netflix is doing something interesting. I think that as you said, they're pioneering something. They're trying something out, and I think that as festivals, that we have to be open to what's happening in the industry and to adapt accordingly, but also to always have what is in our hearts, in mind, and to make sure that we are on track to do what we're doing, and that is for Sundance in particular to be a discovery festival and to find the artists that eventually will end up, in the arms of Netflix and the Amazons to get to wider audiences.
Apple and
Hulu, etc. Not to leave anybody out.
Everybody.
Well, Netflix is an issue for Cannes, but it's an interesting one because what it really comes down to is that you have such a different exhibition platform that we like to. Some people like to sort of go 3-year exclusive window. You've got to be kidding. And then on the other hand, you're protecting the films and the filmmakers, and you have a very healthy industry.
It's controversial, actually, yeah. And I'm also an exhibitor. I run a film theater, so I kind of have also this point of view of the exhibition. And actually, it's true that France has one of the most kind of complex and effective public system in order to defend diversity. And I think there is no other country in the world with this number of kind of the most different film released in theater. It's really all sort of commercial potential. So it's really a treasure kind of to have this kind of system, and I totally understand kind of the reaction, let's say, of the representative of this system, so the exhibitors, towards kind of Netflix and other platforms seen as a menace. And for me, actually, I would like to say that I'm staying with the directors, so this is kind of my main focus, and we are called like that. So for me, the thing is just to focus on cinema rather than on support, rather on the technical way to see it. So for me, it's kind of there is a path that kind of both parties should do in order to find a solution that don't kind of harm filmmakers and cinema in general. And I really think that there is kind of it's definitely a possibility that to find a solution to integrate these kind of new evolutions of film kind of distribution without harming what is actually working very well and in a very effective way. So it's about sitting down and not building walls for me. It's about discussing what can be done in order to make, kind of to integrate in a fair way, for example, the platform within an existing system in terms of, taxes as well, and there is all these sort of issues that have to be regulated, and for me it's definitely theoretically very possible. It's just about willing to dialogue rather than.
I was just going to say, Roma and probably The Irishman are the two landmark examples of how major auteurs can work with streaming services and kind of provoke that tension with traditional exhibition. But I always think of a film like Hala, which premiered at Sundance, Middelbag's film, which is absolutely beautiful. Apple bought it, and it'll be on a streaming service. We're showing it here at our festival as well. And I think of festivals offering the opportunity to showcase a new filmmaker who doesn't have that big auteur reputation already, but needs that showcase of a festival. But then that film really works best when, especially in the case of Hala, a girl gets to watch it in her bedroom, on her laptop, share it with friends, talk about it, connect with it, because it speaks to her. And it doesn't matter, honestly, to me, if that goes into movie theaters and has a 2 or 3 or 5 week release. If the people that movie's meant for hear about it from a film festival and see it through a streaming service, that's a success.
Well, what film festivals offer is a kind of branding, a kind of identifiable name for a movie or an upcoming filmmaker that Netflix has no ability to do.
Right. Yeah.
Because theaters, playing in theaters, I keep saying this phrase, but it's always stuck with me. There's nothing like 3 weeks in a theater to build word of mouth.
Yeah.
It's
true.
a thing. It doesn't, and festivals are so important for that.
But that's the thing. I think I'm really convinced that the two forms of distribution can totally coexist and serve each other. I mean, it can be very they complement each other in a way, because festivals are selecting, curating, kind of highlighting, and Netflix is just making the access to the film much easier especially for people that don't live in big cities where films are programmed constantly. So I mean, the thing is just trying to stop as much as possible to oppose these two ways, and to find a way in which they can really kind of work both in the same sense.
It's one ecosystem. There's just some new fish in the water, I suppose.
Well, I guess I mean, you see what's coming down the pike. Every year, you look at everything. I mean, is there a risk that that the 2-hour film is in some kind of danger? Do you see that?
Not me.
Not really.
Not at all, actually. I mean, people keep saying death of cinema, since the 1950s, right? When is it going to die?
The sky is falling.
And television was going to kill cinema. Home video was going to kill cinema. It has not happened. It won't die.
But it will change.
It'll change, yes, exactly.
What do you see? What do you see are the forces of change right now?
Well, in Germany, it's very obvious that the audience which goes still to the cinema to watch films is more like 35 plus, I'd say. That it's very difficult to get an audience which is in between 20 and 35 to come back to the cinema. They do it, but very rarely. So it means you have to adapt maybe the films you show, because it's different sort of films which the elder audience is interested in. And I think that will change, and at some point it might become more like a very special event to go to the cinema, and it's not like, I used to go to the cinema in the 80s and 90s, like once a week or once every 2 weeks. It was a very regular thing, and I don't think many people see it like that nowadays anymore. And this will have an impact on what kind of films you can program in a cinema. And you have to work much harder to find your audience, and you have to more specifically market the films you're showing. Like in Berlin, there's a quite small cinema, it's called Wolfkino, but they work a lot, and they do a lot of events, and otherwise it's very difficult to make a young audience go back and see more cinephile films, more artistic films.
All right. Anyone else on that one? You're not worried about it? Nope?
No. I mean, I think our industry is full of ebbs and flows, and as Cameron mentioned, and so I think the thing that is always of such great value is, as you mentioned, the collective experience of watching a film on a big screen. I feel like that will never die.
All right. So what are the forces of change that have made all of you take new roles at your festivals? There has been an unbelievable shift of personnel, people moving from one festival to another. It feels like an older guard is stepping down in a way. What's going on?
Just, change, time. People grow through generations, and eventually they come to the ends of their careers, and there is a new generation coming up. I do think that the conversation that happens online, certainly in North America, I don't know if it's the same in Europe, but I am very aware of social media, the internet, film Twitter, things like that actually do make a difference, because there's a different conversation happening there than might have happened, say, in the pages of the Village Voice and the New York Times in the 1970s and 80s, right? So film culture has changed. And I think that changes curation and programming as well, because the debate is faster, it's quicker, there are more hot takes out there. It's not the long considered pieces that Pauline Kael and others used to write. And that just generates a different environment for what we do at film festivals. You have to either be in it or you pull yourself outside of it entirely, and you risk irrelevance. So I think being a part of those conversations and helping to lead them where you can is something that we try to do at our festival.
Kim, are you on film Twitter?
Am I on film Twitter? No.
I knew this.
If you look for me on Twitter, you will see like maybe 2 tweets.
What's interesting about that is that Sundance, especially, where there's so many new movies introduced all at once, and many of them are looking for distribution, as they do here in Toronto, that film Twitter reaction is key. That's exactly what the buyers and sellers are looking at. You're going to give people the best movies without worrying about that.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's somebody else's job to do that, I think. But, I do feel passionate about the movies we show, and I hope that they go on to great success. And
you're not tracking the market so much.
Not so much. I mean, I think that our job is to find those films. We root for them in the marketplace, and that's that's the main thing. And also, I think that there are so many paths to success, beyond how much a film makes in the box office. And so, the fact that we are discovering talent and helping them to make more films, introducing them to the LA industry, and helping them, to find futures beyond our festival is great.
Yeah, that's the Sundance. Yeah. That's the Sundance mission. But what are the forces that are making film festivals what are the challenges? What are the difficulties? What are the things you worry about at night? When and then we'll ask what's going well. but there's you have to get sponsors and funding and keep the audiences coming in and all of that.
Well, in Berlin we even have the problem that we need the theaters. So right now there is a very big issue with one of the theaters at the Potsdamer Platz, which has like 10 screening rooms, and we're not sure whether it will still exist in February or whether they close down. And this is for us a very big issue. Then the main screening hall with I think 1,800 seats, it's actually a musical theater, and there are issues with how do we get it. So these are the very practical things which keep me quite awake at night.
If the theaters go away, that's a slight problem.
Yeah, well, I do think film festivals generally are healthy, and the film festival culture is strong. We depend on just the infrastructure of movie theaters, which are commercial houses in some cases, and that's not as strong because they're closing down all over the world.
That's a big problem. It's definitely a problem. All righty then. What do you see coming up in terms of changes you'd like to make in the future? Things that could make festivals different and progressive and challenging for audiences. Things you'd like to see happen.
You're looking at
me? I'm looking at you.
Okay.
Now that you're in charge.
If only it were that simple. I mean, the one thing I'll say is that I think festivals evolve rather than radically change overnight, and I'm certainly not looking to make drastic new changes without thinking things through. I think we have to stay with our audience, and our audience is watching things much more widely. Our audience is much more used to choosing rather than being chosen for, in terms of people presenting a curated menu for them. People actually are customizing their own culture in a way that they never did before. I don't know that we've figured out how to engage with that necessarily, or that we ever will, but that's something we have to be aware of. People curate for themselves everything. People curate their apartments, their environments, their playlists, everything. So that's something that didn't exist maybe 20, 30 years ago in the same way.
So that's a question of how you engage with them online and how you...
Yeah, just what their expectations are of a film festival. Right? I think that has changed, and I'm sure that the audience that grew up entirely in the internet, and I don't think we're fully there yet in terms of a festival audience, but once we get there, with that multiplicity of choice and that kind of customization, that practice of customization, that's going to change how people go to film festivals. It has to. So that's something we're looking at. I don't have the answers that I can share today in terms of what that means, but that's one thing.
How about you, Kim? You must have some ideas about what you'd like to see happen now that you're there?
Well, we're already sort of working on this, and part of it is to really bring back sort of the idea of the art of film and talking about ideas more. And so we, I don't even know if I'm supposed to say this. It's okay. We're live streaming around the world.
Just between us.
Just between us. So we're looking at creating a space, maybe towards the end of the festival, where we are able to really focus on art and ideas, and to look at what is going into what goes into making a film. A lot of the films I've been seeing lately, something like Room 237, the film we showed about the making of Alien, really inspired me personally, and made me think like, oh, this is how I thought about films when I first started loving films. Before I first started worrying about, which new film are we going to show, it was always about the art for me that was so exciting, and just what the thought and all of that goes into making a film, and the creative decisions. So that is something I'm focusing on.
Cool. How about you?
About the
Fortnight?
possible development.
New ways of presenting, new ways of reaching audiences.
I really think that, there are kind of, each one of us has a very different mission, in a way, compared to the festival that we are working for. And, for example, kind of big metropolitan festival like Toronto or Berlin have a completely different kind of potential or horizon that, festival with audience-based rather than Cannes, which is kind of heavily professional-based. And it's a completely different way of looking at how and what we should do in order to develop our events. So what we call film festival can have a very, very kind of different nature, and can provide a completely different outcome for the films. So it's really about, on my side, I don't think there is a universal response. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of, it's about thinking what makes sense in the specific context we are operating. And for Cannes, for me, for example, would be to continue this tradition that we were talking about kind of taking risk and kind of cultivating this area of filmmaking and trusting, kind of, new filmmaker or new languages. This is what I think we can do as Fortnight rather than as film festival in a more general way. Because I have difficulties in finding a more general kind of answer.
No, Fortnight is working. There's nothing wrong with Fortnight. And Berlin is working too, but you must have new horizons, as it were.
Well, as mentioned before, I think I would very much like to try and see whether this, the success of the generation section, which is for a young audience up to 20, if we sort of can use this to give the young audience maybe more guidance, show them what film history is, where films come from, how film has evaluated and evolved over the years, and to make them enthusiastic to keep going to the cinema, even if they're 21 and 22, and see that it's another part of seeing films in the cinema. I agree with Cameron that for us the focus is also on the big screen in a big cinema hall, and the internet, the platforms, the streaming is like an additional asset, but it's not the main. And to convince the audience that it is special to be in a cinema, that would be my goal.
Absolutely. Let's open it up for some questions. Raise your hand. I think we have microphones, so we're going to go for this guy here in the middle on the aisle, if we can get that to him. There's.
I can help that. That's the question. Relationship between festivals and theatrical exhibition.
Mike's here for you, Sean.
There it is. The mic is,
Hi,
there's two of them.
thanks. I used to work for festivals, and now I work
You know
for,
how it works.
now I work for filmmakers. Back to the question of the relationship of festivals and theatrical exhibition. Obviously, you're all representing festivals at the top of this pyramid, but below that, it's a 5,000 plus festival universe in which many of the films that are being exhibited are only circulating through those festivals. I'm not talking about galas here or competition films or premieres at Sundance, but all the other films that are not getting out of the festival bubble. What is the role of film festivals as the primary exhibition platform for all these other films and the responsibility to filmmakers in that universe, a 5,000 film festival universe?
Money.
Money?
Yeah, I think, you know, you're right. There's some festivals that are larger festivals that are premiere launch festivals, and their job is to make people aware of these new voices, these new filmmakers, that the films exist. And then there's another tranche of films, 5,000, I actually wasn't aware of that number, and they can often be the exhibition circuit for a number of particularly smaller independent films. Most of those smaller festivals will pay rental fees for those films at festivals, and that may be all the revenue that comes in theatrically for those films. So I think that's really the major role. Ideally, those films then, through that festival play, get other forms of ancillary benefits, whether it's on television or streaming services, and they get even more revenue back that way. Hopefully that ecosystem allows those filmmakers to make more films.
Another question? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm a filmmaker from Vancouver. I came here for the festival. I'm really loving TIFF. I like the point you said how it's an issue getting young audience to the festival, and I do really see that because I don't see much people that's older, like younger, like in 20s, early 20s at this festival. So one thing I was like talking to my friends and I was asking, I'm going to TIFF, and they're like, oh, what is TIFF? And then I said, I'm going to see the Joker movie, and they're like, oh, that's so cool. So I think that was really smart, like, you know, screening like younger targeted films and stuff like that. So yeah, that's one thing like I think film festival should improve on, because getting young audience to the festival. Yeah.
Do you have a question though?
I'm just addressing that. I think screening films like Joker and like very young targeted audience films is really smart. So, yeah.
Well, Cameron, I mean, how important is it to screen Joker? You screened it presumably because you thought it was of value.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting movie. I think it's got one of the best performances that I've seen all year in it, and that's why we invited it. That it appeals to a younger audience is great. You know, we have lots of other films that we think would appeal to younger audiences too that might not be as known, right? So I'm glad you're here, and then hopefully you'll discover other films as well. Getting younger audiences to festivals, I think, is absolutely critical. I mean, you've mentioned it. I think it's something that we're all very interested in. Most of us have some kinds of programs to allow greater access, because just ticket price is often an an issue for younger audiences. So I think we're all, in one way, working on that.
But also the kids' programming we do too, I think is also highly influential to children and people who are going to be the next generations of cinema goers.
Yeah.
Over there? Somebody's got the mic.
I got it.
There you go.
Thank you. I'm a journalist and also doing a PhD about cultural diversity in film festivals like Toronto and Cannes and San Sebastian. And I wanted to ask you, because Cameron Bailey talked about Hala, for instance. That's a good platform, a film festival for cultural diversity, but I don't know if lately, with things so needed as LGBTQ, gender equality, or Netflix, we are pushing aside the cultural diversity that film festivals were so important for. So I wanted to ask you, what's the role of cultural diversity, of discovering filmmakers from, I don't know, Africa, Latin America, that kind of countries in your film festivals? Thank you.
Sure. I'll just start briefly, but I'm sure everyone has opinions on that. We have films from 84 countries at our festival this year, and that's something we take great pride in and we work on. We've got programmers who've got real expertise in cinema coming from pretty much every part of the world. I think that's true of all of our festivals. It's important, especially if you are a big festival with more resources, to actually send programmers beyond your home city. You can't program successfully internationally by just staying where you are, and just learning when you travel to every continent and look for films is really a big part of how we're able to do what we do, and I'm sure that's the case for everyone here.
Yes, it is actually. Also in Berlin, there, I don't know the number of different nations, but it's like also very diverse, and films from all continents. So I think it's important to give the audience the opportunity to see films from different cultures, to see how other countries, how the films in other countries have developed, how cinema has developed there, which filmmakers are interesting there, to see other lifestyles, other conventions, and I think that is an important communicative tool.
So where do the programmers find the films, and how far away do they have to go to find them? You must have really scoured in a different way to find some of the things that you did.
Were you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and that's something that that as soon as I started programming for Sundance was something I felt really strongly about, was to build up our international program. Because we're known as a U.S. festival, you know, people, and a lot of international films did not see us as the place to world premiere their films. Now it's a completely different story, and that, I think a lot of that has to do with the hard work that our programming team has done over the years. You know, we are traveling all the time. Anybody who follows me on Instagram will know that.
She's got bona fides.
And you know, this goes for the entire team. One of our programmers, Heidi Zwicker, goes to South Africa every year. You know, and when I first started programming at Sundance, we didn't have such great ties with Asia, and now we have a festival there. We have Sundance Hong Kong. So these are all efforts we've been making over the years, and I really feel that they have been paying off in the last few years.
So it's not just about looking at other festivals. It's about going to the countries themselves.
It's about going to the countries. It's about meeting producers and filmmakers and having good relationships with film commissions, going to co-production markets. I think that there are so many different ways that we've really built up our international program.
And you all track the filmmakers themselves and keep a sense of where they are.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Greetings, folks. Thanks for being here. Hi, Cameron. Hello. Hi, my name is Temi Ojo. I come from the United States, by way of Nigeria. Question is, I was just curious, being the heads of these film festivals, what do you feel, or how do you approach your responsibility to almost curate culture, you know, sort of address a lot of times films sort of set the tone for cultural perspectives, at least in the United States and around the world. And I feel like you have a very, very powerful opportunity to do that. So I'm wondering how you specifically, perhaps individually, share your approach to that responsibility.
Briefly, I would just say, I look at it kind of like being at a mixing board, you know, in a sound suite, where you have the ability to turn up the volume on different levels of different films, different kinds of filmmaking, different approaches to storytelling. And I know that in every case of probably every festival here, there have been moments, whether it's Beasts of the Southern Wild or films that come out of the Fortnight or the Berlinale, where just talking about the film consistently, how you position the film, where it plays, what day it plays on, what critics and buyers are in the room, you can actually adjust the cultural conversation, right? So talking a lot about Moonlight suddenly moves that filmmaker and that film and that style of filmmaking and that kind of storytelling to the fore. And you just kind of keep hammering it home. And there were other films at our festival that year and at Telluride that year that might have also been high profile and had bigger stars in them, but I think curators have the opportunity to actually just amplify what we think is worth paying attention to and talking about.
You do that beautifully, all of you, but it's also about which section of your festival it's in. That's a big conversation, isn't it? Especially with you two, I think.
Yeah.
And you, yeah, it must be for all of you.
Yeah. I think that you know that we do want to set up a film for the best possible means of success, and so and it does come down to whether a film goes into competition or is it in our premieres, and these are conversations that we end up
next or whatever. Yeah.
Next, exactly. And these are conversations that we take very seriously, and they're ones that we hope our filmmakers trust us on too, because we know our festival well, and to be able to for them to trust us that we have their best interests in mind I think is really important.
Because sometimes the higher profile section may be the wrong move.
Yes,
exactly.
That's absolutely true. It's why I think each of us has many different sections, and we actually do talk these things through quite seriously, because you want to support what's best for the film and the impact you want it to have, rather than just put things in a big section because you personally like it or something like that. If it doesn't work for the film, it's the wrong section.
And opening night of Fortnight has an impact that maybe being in competition wouldn't have.
Yeah, I mean, for the Fortnight especially because we can't really articulate much. I mean, we have one selection of around 20-something films. So about this issue, I mean, for me, the Fortnight, as I interpret it, is about kind of moving lines in perception of film language, but also about what's happening in the world. For me, it's about contemporary cinema, and contemporary cinema is a reflection of the state of things and the world. So for me, this kind of is included in this sensitivity that I try to trigger also in my selection committee for kind of what is vibrating, what is moving, what is coming out. It's how many moonlight are out there to be discovered, and this is kind of being sensitive to contemporary film culture and contemporary film language, and which kind of brings also the evolution of the topics that are connected with what is in films. So this is our way, also because we have this kind of limited space. So we really try to, a film kind of carries for us so many things and so many values and so many kind of potential topics to be discussed.
Hi. My name is Jessie Fairbanks. I'm a programmer as well. I work for some of the larger festivals and some of the smaller festivals. And I wanted to ask Cameron, you had brought up the idea of helping audiences curate their own experience at a festival. And so all of these festivals, the largest and at the top of the food chain and at the bottom, we have limited resources in terms of how we can market things. So my question is, what kind of conversations are you having with filmmakers, and what kind of tools are you giving them to do self-promotion so that audiences can find out about these smaller films and help curate a unique experience at festivals? Any of you.
Okay. I mean, I can just say very quickly, films come into festivals sometimes with varying levels of support, right? Some have publicity teams and marketing teams and that kind of thing, and they will probably be fine because there's a whole strategy in place. If you're coming in more independently, you have to depend on other things. I do think that social media has been really valuable in terms of allowing filmmakers to use those tools to promote their films and reach their audience. In a lot of cases, it's not about just telling everybody about your film. It's a matter of finding exactly who you think your film is going to speak to most, identifying that audience and speaking to them in a very kind of strong, compelling way. And social media can do that through just the various different sort of streams that exist out there. We try to also make sure that we write our program notes, our catalog notes, and whatever's on the website and how we communicate the film in a way that speaks to an audience. And when I'm writing a note, I actually think about the language that I use. If I'm writing about Dolomite is my name, that's a different language than if I'm writing about Hustlers, for instance, to take two examples we have this year, because I know that people reading it will understand there's a sort of embedded code in how programmers write about films that's meant to speak to audiences and let them know that this movie is for them.
Anyone else want to address that? No. All right. Oh, who's got the mic? There you go.
So for new filmmakers often trying to break into the scene, they do so with short films. And I just wanted to ask you what each of you look for in a short film to curate and program in your festival, and what sort of impact it has.
Kim used to be a short film
right.
program.
Thank you for asking that question. Short films are definitely dear to me. You know, at Sundance, we get so many submissions. We get 9,000 shorts now, which is an absurd amount. But I think that, you know, in terms of what we look for, I think we're always looking for something that we haven't seen before, or an approach that we haven't seen before, something fresh, something bold, and something that we maybe watch the film and we can't get it out of our heads, and it might not be the thing that we think initially that must be in our program, but if we keep thinking about it, we pay attention to those thoughts, and we have, I feel like I've been talking about this a lot, but we have a very diverse group of programmers who all look for films in a different way, and we all have a different set of experiences that we bring to how we look for films. So I think that is something that is really essential to our process. Hopefully that answered your question.
Just add something about short film. I have been confronted to this question with the Fortnight, saying what we should do with short film, and I kind of had to acknowledge that most of the festival has this kind of, give the short film this particular connotation of young filmmakers that will then kind of make a feature, etc. And which is true in a lot of cases. It's a wonderful kind of possibility of showing what you're able to do. But there are also kind of a completely different world, another world of artists and people that just spend their entire artistic life on films of less than 1 hour. And with the Fortnight, for example, I was just going through the the program of the first year, and the short filmmakers were people like Stan Brakhage, Caroline Schneemann, these Gapol Sharitz. These were the short filmmaker. So it's kind of big film artists that barely did kind of something longer. And so these, for example, for the Fortnight, all other sections in Cannes, they are kind of going for kind of a more narrative, let's say, traditional language. With the Fortnight, we are trying to do something that complement the other proposals. So who are the Caroline Schneemann and the Stan Brakhage of today? So that's the question we are kind of, and we are willing to do so. If a short film is not selected at the Fortnight, it's not because it's a bad short film, it's just because in our way of interpreting the programming is not what we are looking for. So this is, it's another take, another possibility. You say you have multiple programmers watching films on, and there are festivals that have a spirit behind their short film selection that goes beyond the pure value of the film, because for me, there is no such thing.
Go ahead.
My name is Rafael. I'm originally from Brazil. I live in LA as a film producer. I have the pleasure to attend all you guys' festival in the past, and that every time I go, I change as a human being, as a filmmaker as well. So my question goes aligned with what she had asked about what you guys are looking for in short films. And my question goes towards Mariette and Kim, which you guys' applications are coming soon. And I feel like every time I go, me and my colleagues and my friends were always discussing within each other, what's going to be the theme this year? What are we going to be exploring? Because I feel like in the beginning of the year, again, as a filmmaker and as a person, it changes a lot of my idea of like, what am I going to be seeing in media? What are we going to be challenging ourselves to be talking about? What can we change our stories, and like, what are we going to be seeing next year? This might be a question that you guys don't know yet, obviously, because the movies are still coming up and receiving applications. But if this question makes any sense at all.
This is actually a good last question. in a way, if you see some themes on the horizon as from where you are now in terms of the films that are being made, any trends you're observing?
For Berlin, it's very early to say something about that. And on the short film, we have a new curator, and I think she will have a new distinct voice in curating her program. So I'm also very eager to see how it will be, but I don't have any idea yet.
I think that filmmakers are always making films that reflect what's happening in the world, and so I expect a lot of those films. But I think that a lot of it in many ways it will, I imagine, will be a continuation of a lot of the things that we saw last year around. People searching for the truth and people taking risks and speaking out, because that I feel is very much part of our political DNA right now.
Do you see trends in the films that you're seeing now, Paolo, in terms of filmmakers addressing certain topics and ways of looking at things?
Not really. I mean,
I don't think any festival that's not a specific thematic festival programs according to themes, right? Themes emerge afterwards, and it's really just a way of people trying to wrap their heads around a number of different things that seem very disparate. So themes, I think, are imposed after the fact, but I don't think any of us go out looking for films that fit a theme.
What's the theme of Toronto this year?
I don't know.
On that note, we're killing it. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to our esteemed guests. And please come back at 1:30 for our panel with Telefilm Canada. Thank you.